The massive space station called Nexus Prime floated in the darkness between three star systems. It was neutral ground, a place where different alien species could meet without fear. Today, the station buzzed with activity like never before. Ships from across the galaxy had come here for one reason. The Void Hunters were destroying everything in their path. Commander Zixtal of the Reptilian Alliance stood at the observation deck, watching more ships arrive. His scaled hands gripped the railing as he saw the latest fleet entering the docking bay. The Zephyrians had brought their finest vessels. Each ship gleamed like a polished mirror, their hulls made of some metal that seemed to bend light around it. Plasma cores glowed bright blue through transparent sections of the hull. These ships looked more like works of art than weapons of war. "Impressive," said a voice beside him. Zixtal turned to see Admiral Kessara, the Zephyrian fleet commander. Her tall, thin frame moved with the grace of her people. Her large, dark eyes reflected the light from her ships. "My engineers tell me these new plasma drives can reach speeds that were impossible just 10 years ago." Zixtal nodded. His own ships were docked nearby, built from living coral that his people had grown in the deep oceans of their homeworld. The bioships pulsed with their own heartbeats, their organic weapons ready to spit acid across space. "The Hive Collective brought something interesting too," he said, pointing to a section of the docking bay where twisted metal shapes sat like sleeping nightmares. Their ships looked like they were grown rather than built. "Because they were," Kessara replied. "The Hive doesn't build ships. They breed them. Each vessel is part machine, part living creature. Very effective, but disturbing to look at." More ships kept arriving. The crystal-built vessels of the Veltar people caught starlight and threw it back in rainbow patterns. The Mechanical Union sent their geometric ships that looked like flying cities made of steel and circuits. Each fleet represented the best their species could offer. The finest technology, the newest weapons, the most advanced defenses. "Have you heard anything about the human delegation?" Zixtal asked. Kessara made a sound that might have been laughter among her people. "Humans? They barely qualify as a spacefaring species. I've seen their civilian ships. Crude metal boxes with chemical rockets. Primitive doesn't begin to describe their technology. But they are part of the Galactic Council now," Zixtal reminded her. "Only because they showed up and asked nicely," Kessara said. "Their planet sits in a decent location for trade routes. But military power? I doubt they have more than a few dozen ships, and those probably couldn't fight their way out of an asteroid field." The Void Hunters had appeared 6 months ago at the edge of known space. Nobody knew where they came from or what they wanted. They simply arrived and began destroying colonies. Their ships were black as space itself, armed with weapons that could crack planets. They moved through space like death itself, leaving nothing but debris behind. Every major military force in the galaxy had tried to stop them. The Zephyrian Third Fleet had engaged them near the Calo system. The Void Hunters had destroyed 27 ships in minutes. The Reptilian Alliance had lost an entire battle group trying to protect a mining colony. Even the feared Hive Collective had retreated after losing half their invasion swarm. Now all these species sat in the same station, forced to work together against a common enemy. Pride and old grudges would have to wait. The galaxy needed every ship, every weapon, every advantage they could find. "The human delegation has arrived," announced a voice over the station's communication system. Zixtal and Kessara moved to a better viewing position. Through the transparent aluminum windows, they could see a small ship approaching the docking bay. It looked exactly like what Kessara had described. A metal box with engines stuck on the back. No elegant curves, no artistic design, no advanced materials that caught the light. Just gray metal plates welded together around what was probably a very basic life support system. "That's their diplomatic vessel?" Kessara asked, her voice full of disbelief. "I've seen cargo haulers with more style." The ship docked with a series of mechanical clanks and hisses. No smooth magnetic seals or energy barriers. Just old-fashioned metal connecting to metal. A few minutes later, 3 humans walked through the airlock into the station. The human delegation looked as plain as their ship. They wore simple blue uniforms without decoration. No medals, no ceremonial weapons, no signs of rank that would impress other species. The leader was a middle-aged woman with graying hair and tired eyes. She carried a basic data pad and a worn leather briefcase. "Ambassador Chen," announced the station's AI as the humans approached the main conference area. "Representing the Terran Federation." Other delegates barely looked up as the humans found their seats. The Zephyrians whispered among themselves, probably making jokes. The Hive Collective's representatives clicked their mandibles in what might have been amusement. Even the usually polite Veltar crystals dimmed slightly, as if embarrassed by association. Ambassador Chen seemed not to notice the reactions around her. She opened her briefcase and pulled out what looked like paper documents. Actual paper. In an age when most species stored information in quantum matrices or biological memory cells. "Welcome, delegates," said Chancellor Mortex, the station's administrator. His forearms gestured to the assembled crowd. "We face a threat unlike any in recorded history. The Void Hunters have destroyed 17 colonies and killed millions of beings. Our individual fleets have proven inadequate. Only by working together can we hope to stop them." A holographic display showed the latest intelligence reports. The Void Hunters were moving through space in a pattern that suggested they were heading for the core worlds. Populated planets with billions of inhabitants lay in their path. "We must pool our resources," Chancellor Mortex continued. "Every ship, every weapon, every tactical advantage must be shared if we hope to succeed." Admiral Kessara stood up. Her tall frame commanded attention. "The Zephyrian Republic pledges our entire 7th Fleet to this effort. 50 ships with plasma cannon arrays and quantum shield generators. Our technology represents the cutting edge of military science." Other delegates began making similar commitments. Battlecruisers, dreadnoughts, carrier ships, support vessels. The numbers grew impressive quickly. Thousands of ships, millions of crew members, weapons that could reshape solar systems. When it came time for the human delegation to speak, the room fell quiet. Not the respectful quiet that had greeted the other announcements, but the awkward silence of people waiting for someone to embarrass themselves. Ambassador Chen stood slowly. She looked around the room at the assembled aliens, each representing civilizations thousands of years old, technologies beyond human understanding, military traditions that stretched back to before humans had learned to use fire. "The Terran Federation," she said in a calm voice, "pledges our full support to this alliance." She sat back down without giving numbers, without describing their technology, without making any grand promises. The silence stretched longer. Admiral Kessara couldn't help herself. "Ambassador Chen," she said, her voice carrying just enough politeness to avoid being openly rude. "Perhaps you could share some details about Earth's military contribution. How many ships can your people provide?" Ambassador Chen looked up from her paper documents. For a moment something flickered in her tired eyes, something that might have been amusement. "Enough," she said simply. The word hung in the air like a challenge nobody understood. The strategy session had been going on for 6 hours. Holographic star maps filled the center of the conference room, showing Void Hunter movements and predicted attack routes. Military commanders from a dozen species argued over fleet positions, supply lines, and battle tactics. Admiral Kessara pointed to a cluster of stars near the galactic rim. "If we position the combined fleet here, we can intercept them before they reach the core systems. The Zephyrian Republic can provide the fastest ships for hit-and-run attacks." Commander Zixtal shook his reptilian head. "Too far out. We need to draw them closer to our supply bases. Let them come to us, then strike with everything we have." The argument continued while Ambassador Chen sat quietly at the table taking notes on her paper pad. She hadn't spoken much during the planning sessions. When asked direct questions, she gave short, practical answers that revealed nothing about human military capabilities. "The problem," said General Vorth of the Mechanical Union, his voice coming through electronic speakers, "is that we don't know their true strength. Every engagement so far has ended quickly. They hit hard, destroy everything, and disappear before we can mount a proper defense. Which is why we need every available ship," Admiral Kessara said. She turned toward the human delegation. "Ambassador Chen, we've shared detailed information about our fleets, weapons specifications, shield strengths, crew numbers, but you've told us nothing about your military forces." Ambassador Chen looked up from her notes. "What would you like to know?" "Everything," Kessara said, frustration creeping into her voice. "How many ships does Earth have? What weapons do they carry? How do you plan to contribute to this fight?" "We'll do our part," Chen replied calmly. "That's not an answer," Kessara snapped. "We're facing the destruction of civilization itself. This isn't the time for mysterious responses and vague promises." The room fell silent. Other delegates watched the exchange with interest. Some probably agreed with the Zephyrian admiral. The humans had been accepted into the Galactic Council only recently, and mostly for political reasons. Their technology seemed primitive compared to the rest of the galaxy. Their single ship looked like scrap metal compared to the sleek vessels in the docking bays. Ambassador Chen closed her notebook and stood up. Admiral Kesara, do you doubt Earth's commitment to this alliance? I doubt Earth's ability to contribute meaningfully, Kesara replied. Your people have been in space for what, 200 years? Most of us have been traveling between stars since before your species discovered fire. Your technology is centuries behind ours. Your largest ships are smaller than our escort vessels. You've seen one diplomatic transport, Chen said quietly. That's hardly a fair assessment of our entire civilization. I've seen the intelligence reports, Kesara continued. Human ships use chemical rockets and nuclear reactors. You still use projectile weapons instead of energy beams. Your computers are built from silicon chips instead of quantum matrices. Frankly, I'm not sure why you were invited to this conference at all. Other delegates shifted uncomfortably. The Zephyrian admiral was saying what many of them thought. But diplomatic protocol usually prevented such direct confrontations. Commander Zixtal tried to smooth things over. Perhaps we're getting ahead of ourselves. Every contribution matters regardless of size, does it? Kesara asked. We're planning to engage an enemy that destroys fleets in minutes. Are we supposed to risk everything to protect ships that can't defend themselves? Are we going to slow our entire strategy to accommodate primitive technology? Ambassador Chen looked around the room. She saw doubt in alien faces, uncertainty in their body language. These beings commanded fleets of advanced warships, but they were scared. The Void Hunters had shattered their confidence along with their battle groups. You want to know about our military capabilities, Chen said. Very well. But words won't convince you. Admiral Kesara, would you be willing to observe a demonstration? Kesara's large eyes narrowed. What kind of demonstration? A simple one. Tomorrow morning, we'll show you what human ships can do. If you're not satisfied, we'll withdraw from the alliance and leave you to fight the Void Hunters your way. The offer caught everyone by surprise. Chancellor Mortex leaned forward in his chair. Ambassador Chen, that's not necessary. No one questions Earth's good intentions. But they question our capabilities, Chen replied. That's fair. We are the newest members of this alliance. You've shown us your finest ships and weapons. It's only right that we return the favor. Admiral Kesara studied the human ambassador for a long moment. Something in Chen's calm confidence made her hesitate. But pride and logic pushed her forward. Very well. I accept your challenge. Tomorrow morning you can show us whatever Earth considers a military demonstration. Excellent, Chen said. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a small communication device. It looked like a simple radio, the kind that might be used by planetary security forces. Control, this is Ambassador Chen. We need a demonstration area prepared for tomorrow morning. Something suitable for fleet maneuvers. A voice crackled back through the device. Understood, Ambassador. How much space do you need? Standard engagement zone should be fine. Maybe a little extra room for safety. And how many ships should we prepare for? Chen glanced at Admiral Kesara, who was listening with obvious interest. All of them. The voice on the radio paused. Ma'am, did you say all of them? You heard correctly. Acknowledged. We'll begin preparations immediately. Chen put the radio back in her briefcase and returned to her seat. The demonstration will begin at 800 station time. I recommend observing from the main sensor array. You'll want a clear view. Admiral Kesara felt a small twinge of uncertainty. The human ambassador seemed remarkably confident for someone representing what should be a minor military power. But logic reasserted itself. Earth's entire space fleet probably numbered in the dozens, maybe 100 ships at most. Even if they brought everything they had, it would be a tiny force compared to what the other species had contributed. I look forward to it, Kesara said. The rest of the strategy session continued, but the mood had changed. Delegates found themselves glancing at the human ambassador, wondering what exactly they would see tomorrow. Chen continued taking notes as if nothing had happened, occasionally asking technical questions about Void Hunter tactics or weapon effectiveness. As the meeting broke up, Commander Zixtal approached the human delegation. Ambassador Chen, I hope you know what you're doing. Admiral Kesara is not known for her patience with disappointment. Chen smiled for the first time that day. Commander, my people have a saying. Never underestimate someone who volunteers to go first into danger. We didn't ask to join this alliance to hide behind your ships. We came here to help win this war. With respect, Zixtal said, winning requires more than good intentions. It requires firepower, advanced technology, experienced crews. Yes, Chen agreed. It does. That night, the docking bays of Nexus Prime buzzed with activity. Alien crews prepared their ships for the next day's demonstration. Some delegates had decided to move their fleets to better observation positions. They wanted front-row seats for whatever the humans were planning to show them. Admiral Kessera stood in the command center of her flagship, watching sensor readings from the edge of the system. Long-range scanners showed nothing unusual. Empty space stretched in all directions. If the humans had a fleet hiding somewhere, it was either very small or very well concealed. Admiral, her sensor officer reported, I'm detecting some minor gravitational anomalies in Sector 7. Could be ships running silent, but the readings are very faint. How many ships? Kessera asked. Hard to say. Maybe 10 or 12. The signatures are strange, though. Not like anything in our databases. Kessera nodded. 10 or 12 ships sounded about right for Earth's entire military force. Tomorrow's demonstration would be brief and probably embarrassing for everyone involved. In her quarters aboard the diplomatic transport, Ambassador Chen sat at a small desk, writing in an old-fashioned journal with an actual pen. She paused occasionally, looking out the small porthole at the stars beyond. Somewhere in that darkness, her people were preparing for tomorrow's show. She closed the journal and activated her communication device one more time. Control, this is Chen, status report. All units in position, Ambassador. Fleet Admiral Morrison sends her compliments and asks if you want the full display or just enough to make the point. Chen considered the question. These aliens had spent the day arguing tactics while their people died to an enemy they couldn't defeat. They thought humans were primitives with outdated technology. Tomorrow would teach them that sometimes the old ways were the best ways. Full display, she said. Let them see what 200 years of constant warfare produces. Acknowledged. Beginning final preparations now. Chen turned off the radio and prepared for sleep. Tomorrow, the galaxy would learn that humanity had not spent 2 centuries exploring peacefully among the stars. They had spent 2 centuries fighting for every light year of space they claimed. At exactly 800 station time, Admiral Kessera stood in the observation deck of Nexus Prime, alongside delegates from every major species in the galaxy. The massive windows gave them a clear view of empty space stretching toward the system's edge. Long-range sensors showed the same, readings as the night before, faint gravitational anomalies that suggested a small group of ships running silent. Sensor, readings confirmed 12 contacts, reported the station's operations officer. Mass signatures consistent with mid-range vessels. They appear to be moving into the demonstration area now. Commander Zixtal adjusted his position to get a better view. 12 ships. That's actually more than I expected from the humans. Still not much of a fleet, Admiral Kessera replied. My own task force has more ships than that. Ambassador Chen stood quietly near the back of the observation deck. She held her simple communication device but hadn't used it yet. Her calm expression revealed nothing about what was coming. This is traffic control to approaching vessels, announced the station's AI. You are cleared to enter the demonstration zone. Please activate identification beacons and begin your display. The response came not from the communication system, but from space itself. Reality seemed to shimmer and bend at the edge of the system. What had appeared to be empty space suddenly erupted with massive shapes as hundreds of ships dropped their stealth fields simultaneously. Not 12 ships, hundreds. The sensor displays went completely insane as contact after contact appeared on the screens. What in the void? Commander Zixtal breathed. The lead ship materialized first, and every delegate in the observation deck fell silent. It was enormous, easily 3 times the size of the largest Zephyrian dreadnought. Its hull was a patchwork of different metals, covered in armor plating that looked like it had been added layer by layer over many years. Massive weapon turrets bristled from every surface. Scorch marks and impact craters told stories of countless battles. More ships appeared behind it. Battleships, heavy cruisers, destroyers, support vessels. Every single one showed signs of combat damage that had been repaired and reinforced. These weren't pristine ships fresh from construction yards. These were veterans of real warfare. Sensors are reading over 400 vessels, the operations officer reported, his voice shaking slightly. Mass displacement is off the charts. Some of these ships are larger than our space stations. Admiral Cassara stared at the display in shock. That's impossible. Our intelligence report said humans had maybe 50 ships total. Your intelligence was looking at our civilian merchant fleet, Ambassador Chen said quietly. You never asked about our military forces. The lead battleship moved closer to the station, and its hull became visible in detail. What the aliens had thought was primitive construction was actually something far more sophisticated. The mismatched armor plating was layered defense, different materials designed to stop different types of weapons. The hull design looked crude because it prioritized function over form. Every surface served a purpose. This is Fleet Admiral Sarah Morrison aboard the UES Indomitable, came a voice over the communication system, requesting permission to begin the demonstration. Ambassador Chen activated her radio. Permission granted, Admiral. Show them what we can do. With pleasure, Ambassador. The human fleet spread out across the demonstration area with mechanical precision. Ships that had looked clumsy and primitive moments before moved like parts of a single organism. Formations shifted and reformed with the smooth efficiency of long practice. These crews had worked together for years, maybe decades. Beginning Tactical Exercise Alpha 7, Admiral Morrison announced. All units execute pattern recognition drill. What followed was unlike anything the alien observers had ever seen. The human ships moved through combat formations that were brutally efficient. No wasted motion, no hesitation, no confusion about orders. When fighter squadrons launched from the larger vessels, they moved in attack patterns that were clearly designed from hard experience. Look at those weapon placements, Commander Zixtel said, his voice full of professional admiration. Every gun can cover multiple firing arcs. They've eliminated all the blind spots. The Zephyrian Admiral stared at the tactical display. Those are kinetic weapons. Actual projectile cannons, but look at the size of them. The human ships were firing practice rounds at target drones. Instead of the elegant energy beams favored by most galactic species, the humans used massive guns that hurled chunks of metal at incredible speeds. The weapons looked primitive until you saw what they did to targets. The practice drones didn't just get destroyed, they got completely obliterated. Projectile weapons are so outdated, said a Veltar crystal being, its form flickering with uncertainty. Energy weapons are much more efficient. Unless you're fighting something with energy shields, Ambassador Chen replied. Kinetic weapons don't care about shield frequencies or harmonic resonances. They just punch through whatever gets in their way. More details became visible as the demonstration continued. The human ships carried nuclear missiles, but not the simple fusion warheads most species used. These were complex weapons with multiple stages and exotic materials. Some appeared to be designed for specific types of targets. Those missile pods, Admiral Cassara said, pointing at the display. How many nuclear warheads can each ship carry? Enough, Chen replied, using the same word that had ended yesterday's conversation. The tactical exercises showed combat doctrine that was completely different from galactic norms. Most species built beautiful ships designed to fight at long range with energy weapons and defensive screens. The human ships were built like armored fortresses meant to get close and unleash overwhelming firepower. They looked like they were designed to take damage and keep fighting. Admiral Morrison, came a voice from one of the smaller human ships. Request permission to demonstrate close-quarters combat maneuvers. Denied, Morrison replied immediately. We're not here to show off. These people just need to understand what they're working with. But the alien delegates had already seen enough. The human fleet wasn't just large, it was experienced. Every ship movement, every formation change, every tactical decision showed the kind of expertise that only came from actual combat. These weren't parade ships built to impress politicians. They were weapons of war. How long have your people been fighting? Commander Zixtel asked Ambassador Chen. Since we left Earth's solar system, Chen replied. About 200 years of continuous low-level warfare. Territorial disputes, rogue AI fleets, pirate clans, refugee conflicts. Nothing as organized as the Void Hunters, but enough to keep us sharp. 200 years of warfare? Admiral Cassara turned to stare at the human ambassador. Your people have been at war for 2 centuries? Not total war, Chen clarified. But we've never had what you might call peace. Space is dangerous and someone always wants to take what you've built. We learned early that the best way to keep the peace is to be ready for war. The demonstration was reaching its climax. The human fleet formed a massive battle line that stretched across the demonstration area, 400 ships arranged in perfect formation, their weapons trained on imaginary enemies. It was a display of raw military power that dwarfed anything the individual species could field. Fleet Admiral Morrison, Ambassador Chen said into her radio, "That should be sufficient. Thank you for the demonstration." "Our pleasure, Ambassador. Should we return to the outer system?" Chen looked around at the alien delegates. Their expressions ranged from shock to awe to something that might have been fear. These beings had spent yesterday arguing about fleet positions and tactical advantages. Now they were looking at a military force that could probably defeat all their ships combined. "Actually, Admiral, why don't you bring the fleet to standard orbital positions around the station? I think we'll be working together more closely from now on." Acknowledged. "Fleet, this is Morrison. Take standard defensive positions around Nexus Prime. And people, remember that we're guests here. Best behavior." As the human ships moved into protective formations around the station, Ambassador Chen turned to address the assembled delegates. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings of all species, I believe we were discussing battle plans against the Void Hunters. Perhaps we should continue that conversation." Admiral Kessara found her voice first. "Ambassador Chen, I owe you an apology. I underestimated your people severely." "No apology necessary," Chen replied. "You made reasonable assumptions based on the information you had. But now you know what humanity brings to this alliance. The question is, are you ready to work with us?" Commander Zixtal was studying the tactical displays with the eye of a professional soldier. "Those ships of yours, they're built for close combat. The Void Hunters prefer hit-and-run attacks. They might not expect an enemy that wants to get close enough to use kinetic weapons." "That's exactly what we're hoping," Chen said. "Your species fight the way you live, elegantly, efficiently, with advanced technology and careful planning. Nothing wrong with that approach. But sometimes you need someone willing to get their hands dirty." Admiral Kessara looked out at the human fleet surrounding the station. "Yesterday I asked what Earth could contribute to this alliance. I think I have my answer." Fleet Admiral Sarah Morrison materialized in the conference room through the station's holographic projector. Her weathered face appeared above the central table, larger than life and marked with the kind of scars that came from real combat. The assembled alien delegates fell silent as they got their first close look at humanity's military commander Morrison. Looked like she had been fighting wars since before some of the alien species had achieved spaceflight. Gray hair pulled back in a practical style, eyes that missed nothing, and a uniform that was clean but clearly well used. On her collar were rank insignia that seemed to tell stories, multiple service ribbons, campaign medals, and at least 3 different commendation pins. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored delegates," Morrison began, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "Ambassador Chen asked me to brief you on the human approach to warfare. I understand some of you have questions about our methods." Admiral Kessara leaned forward. "Admiral Morrison, your fleet is impressive, but I confess I don't understand your ship designs. They look like they were built in a scrapyard." Morrison's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes that might have been amusement. "That's because many of them were, Admiral. Let me tell you about the UES Indomitable, my flagship." The holographic display shifted to show the massive battleship in detail. Its hull was indeed a patchwork of different materials and construction techniques. Armor plating had been added in layers, weapons mounted and remounted, entire sections rebuilt with different technologies. "She was originally built as a colony transport," Morrison continued, "launched in 2387 to carry 10,000 settlers to a new world. But when we arrived at the Kepler system, we found it already occupied by a machine intelligence that didn't appreciate visitors." The display showed historical footage of that first battle. The civilian transport, barely armed, facing off against sleek robotic vessels with weapons that could slice through hull plating like paper. "We lost 8,000 colonists in the first engagement," Morrison said matter-of-factly. "The survivors had a choice: surrender and hope the machines would let us leave, or fight back with everything we had. We chose to fight." Commander Zixtal studied the footage with professional interest. "How did a civilian ship survive against military opponents?" "By not fighting fair," Morrison replied. "The machines expected us to follow standard combat protocols. Keep our distance, exchange fire with energy weapons, retreat when shields failed. Instead, we rammed the first robot ship that got close enough." The display showed the desperate collision. The human transport, its hull breached and atmosphere bleeding into space, smashing into the mechanical vessel and tearing both ships apart. The machines didn't understand sacrificial tactics, Morrison continued. They calculated odds and made logical decisions. They couldn't predict what desperate humans would do. We turned our transport into a weapon and used it to destroy 3 enemy ships before we had to abandon it. But how did you survive? Asked a Veltar crystal being, its form flickering with curiosity. We rebuilt, Morrison said simply. Salvaged parts from the wrecked ships, combined human engineering with captured alien technology, and built something new. The Indomitable started as a colony ship, became a weapon of war, and has been evolving ever since. The display showed the ship's transformation over decades. Each battle left marks but also improvements. Armor plating taken from defeated enemies, weapons captured and reverse engineered, defensive systems learned through hard experience. The ship that emerged was no longer recognizable as the civilian transport it had once been. Every ship in our fleet has a similar history, Morrison explained. The Defiant was originally a mining vessel until pirates tried to take our asteroid mining operations. The Resolute started as a research ship before we ran into hostile aliens in the Vega system. The Vengeance was a passenger liner before the incident with the Hive Scouts. Admiral Cassara studied the tactical displays with growing understanding. You don't build ships for war. You build ships, then turn them into weapons when you need to. Exactly, Morrison confirmed. Most species design their ships for specific purposes. Warships for fighting, transports for carrying cargo, explorers for discovering new worlds. We build ships to survive whatever we encounter. But surely some of your vessels were purpose-built for combat, Commander Zixtal asked. Morrison nodded toward a section of the fleet display. The newer ships, yes. The Titan-class battleships were designed from the ground up as weapons. But even they incorporate lessons learned from 2 centuries of improvised warfare. The Titan-class ships looked different from the older vessels. Still brutal and practical, but with the clean lines that came from unified design. They were larger than anything else in the human fleet, bristling with enough firepower to threaten space stations. How many people serve in your fleet? Asked the representative from the Mechanical Union. Current active duty personnel number approximately 2 million, Morrison replied. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Every human colony has defense forces. Every mining operation has armed ships. Every trading vessel carries weapons. We don't have a separate military and civilian population. Everyone fights when they need to. The alien delegates exchanged glances. Most galactic species maintained professional military forces that were separate from their civilian populations. The idea of an entire civilization geared for warfare was difficult to comprehend. Admiral Morrison, Ambassador Chen said from her seat at the table, perhaps you could explain our tactical doctrine to our allies. Morrison's expression grew serious. Human tactical doctrine is simple: win at any cost. We don't fight for glory or honor or to prove our technological superiority. We fight to survive, and we use whatever works. She gestured to the fleet display. Your species favor long-range combat with energy weapons and defensive screens. Very civilized, very efficient. Our approach is different. We get close enough to use kinetic weapons because they're harder to defend against. We ram enemy ships when necessary because sometimes that's the most effective attack. We sacrifice individual vessels to save the fleet because sometimes that's what victory requires. But surely you have some code of conduct in warfare, asked the Veltar representative. We don't target civilians, Morrison replied. We don't use biological weapons against inhabited planets. We don't torture prisoners for information. Beyond that, anything that helps us win is acceptable. Commander Zixtal leaned back in his chair, processing what he was hearing. 200 years of this kind of warfare. How many conflicts have you fought? Morrison considered the question. Major campaigns, maybe 30 or 40. The robot wars in the Kepler system lasted 15 years. The Pirate Coalition War took another decade. The Hive incursion was a 5-year running battle across 17 systems. Dozens of smaller conflicts, border disputes, territorial wars. And casualties? Admiral Cassara asked quietly. High, Morrison admitted. We've lost entire fleets, whole colonies, millions of people. But we've survived. More importantly, we've learned from every defeat. The holographic display shifted to show battle footage from various conflicts. Human ships taking terrible damage but continuing to fight. Desperate last stands that turned into victories through sheer determination. Enemy forces retreating not because they were outgunned, but because the humans simply wouldn't stop fighting. The Void Hunters think they understand galactic military doctrine, Morrison continued. They've studied your ships, your tactics, your weaknesses. They know how to defeat fleets that fight at long range with energy weapons and defensive screens. But they don't know how to fight us, Ambassador Chen added. Correct, Morrison confirmed. They expect enemies that will retreat when their shields fail, that will surrender when the odds become hopeless, that will fight according to established rules of engagement. We don't do any of those things. Admiral Kessera studied the tactical displays showing human combat doctrine. Your approach seems effective, but extremely costly. How do you sustain such losses? By making sure the enemy's losses are worse, Morrison replied. We learned early that space warfare isn't about having the prettiest ships or the most advanced technology. It's about who's willing to pay the highest price for victory. The Void Hunters have been winning because they're more ruthless than anyone they've faced, Ambassador Chen explained. They destroy everything, take no prisoners, show no mercy. Against most galactic species, that's an overwhelming psychological advantage. But not against humans, Commander Zixtal realized. No, Morrison said simply. We've been fighting ruthless enemies for 2 centuries. The Void Hunters are just another problem to solve. The alien delegates sat in silence, absorbing what they had learned. The human fleet wasn't just large and experienced, it represented a completely different philosophy of warfare. While other species had advanced beyond the need for constant conflict, humanity had been forged by 2 centuries of survival combat. Admiral Morrison, Admiral Kessera said finally, what do you need from our fleets to fight the Void Hunters effectively? Morrison smiled for the first time during the briefing. Speed and range from the Zephyrian ships, firepower from the reptilian bioweapons. The alert came at 0347 station time, piercing through the darkness of the night cycle aboard Nexus Prime. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in red as delegates rushed to the command center. The Void Hunters had arrived at the edge of the system, 18 hours ahead of schedule. Long-range sensors detect multiple contacts, reported the station's operations officer. At least 60 vessels, moving in formation toward the inner system. Admiral Kessera stood at the tactical display, her face pale in the emergency lighting. 60 ships. That's twice the size of any Void Hunter force we've encountered before. Commander Zixtal studied the sensor readings. They're not attacking randomly this time. Look at that formation, it's a proper military advance. They're learning from their previous engagements. Ambassador Chen arrived at the command center still wearing her sleeping clothes, but her eyes were alert and focused. She activated her communication device immediately. Admiral Morrison, we have incoming hostiles. Status of the fleet? Morrison's voice came back clear and steady. All ships are at battle stations, Ambassador. We've been tracking them since they entered the outer system. Do we have permission to engage? Negative, Admiral Kessera interrupted. We need to coordinate our response with the other fleets. The Zephyrian Republic has 40 ships in this system. We should wait for the full Alliance fleet to arrive. How long until the other fleets get here? Chen asked. Chancellor Mortex checked his displays. The nearest Alliance ships are 12 hours away. The main battle fleet won't arrive for 18 hours. The Void Hunters will reach the populated worlds in 6 hours, the operations officer reported. Admiral Kessera felt ice forming in her stomach. The timing was perfect from the enemy's perspective. They had caught the Alliance forces scattered across multiple systems, arrived ahead of schedule, and brought enough ships to overwhelm the limited forces currently available. We have to delay them, Commander Zixtal said. Even if we can't win, we need to slow their advance until help arrives. My ships are fast, Admiral Kessera offered. We could conduct hit-and-run attacks, try to disrupt their formation. Ambassador Chen was studying the tactical display with a calm expression that contrasted sharply with the tension in the room. Admiral Morrison, what's your assessment of the situation? Morrison's voice carried no trace of concern. Standard engagement, Ambassador. 60 ships is a respectable force, but nothing we haven't handled before. My recommendation is immediate attack before they can establish defensive positions. You want to attack 60 Void Hunter ships with just the human fleet? Admiral Kessera asked in disbelief. That's suicide, is it? Chen asked quietly. Admiral Morrison, casualties estimates for a direct engagement. Acceptable losses, Morrison replied. We'll probably lose 10 to 15 ships, maybe more if they have new weapons. But we'll break their attack formation and force them to retreat or regroup. The alien delegates stared at Ambassador Chen in shock. The humans were talking about attacking a superior enemy force as if it were a routine training exercise. No discussion of retreat, no request for reinforcements, no consideration of hopeless odds. Ambassador Chen, Admiral Kesara said carefully, "I appreciate your people's courage. But this is exactly the kind of thinking that has led to the destruction of every fleet that's faced the Void Hunters. They're stronger than us, better armed, more advanced. They are all of those things," Chen agreed. "But they have one critical weakness. What's that?" Commander Zixtal asked. "They've never fought anyone who hits back," Chen replied. "Admiral Morrison, you have tactical command. Show them what humans do to bullies." Morrison's voice carried a note of satisfaction. "With pleasure, Ambassador. All ships, this is Fleet Command. We are going to battle. Remember your training, trust your shipmates, and make the enemy pay for every inch of space." The human fleet began moving before the alien delegates fully understood what was happening. 400 ships accelerated toward the edge of the system, not in the careful formations favored by galactic militaries, but in loose groups that could respond quickly to changing circumstances. "This is insane," Admiral Kesara muttered, but she couldn't look away from the tactical display. The Void Hunter fleet had arranged itself in a classic attack formation, heavy ships in the center, lighter vessels on the flanks, support ships protected in the rear. It was the same formation they had used to destroy every galactic fleet they had encountered. Efficient, proven, unstoppable. "Contact in 40 minutes, reported the operations officer. The human fleet approached at maximum acceleration, their older engines leaving bright trails across the darkness. They looked like meteors rushing toward collision with an asteroid field. But as they drew closer to the enemy, something unexpected happened. Instead of the careful, long-range engagement that the Void Hunters expected, the humans punched straight through the enemy formation. Their ships were built like armored rams designed to take damage and keep fighting. Energy weapons that would have crippled more elegant vessels were absorbed by layered armor plating. "They're not even trying to avoid enemy fire," Commander Zixtal observed in amazement. "Why would they?" Ambassador Chen asked. "Their ships are built to fight at close range. Getting shot at is just part of the job." The first exchange of fire lit up space with energy beams and nuclear explosions. The Void Hunter weapons were indeed advanced, punching through human armor with disturbing ease. But the human ships didn't slow down. If anything, they accelerated. "UES Defiant has taken critical damage," came Morrison's voice over the communication system. "She's continuing her attack run." On the display, they could see the human heavy cruiser trailing atmosphere and debris, half her weapon turrets destroyed, but still firing everything she had at the nearest Void Hunter vessel. The enemy ship's shields flared and failed under the concentrated kinetic bombardment. "First enemy kill confirmed," Morrison reported. "Defiant, well done. Now get to the repair ships before you lose life support." The battle became a swirling melee as human ships closed to point-blank range. This was exactly the kind of fight the Void Hunters wanted to avoid. Their weapons were designed for long-range precision strikes. Their shields were optimized against energy weapons. Their tactics assumed enemies that would maintain safe distances. The humans ignored all of those assumptions. They flew their ships like guided missiles, ramming enemy vessels when their weapons were destroyed, using their own hulls as weapons when necessary. The disciplined Void Hunter formation dissolved into chaos as ship after ship found itself under close assault by enemies that refused to die easily. "UES Resolute is making a kamikaze run on the enemy flagship," Morrison announced calmly. "All ships clear the target area." Admiral Kesara watched in horror as the human battleship, crippled and burning, accelerated directly toward the largest Void Hunter vessel. "They're going to ram it?" "The Resolute lost main engines and most of her weapons," Chen explained. "But she still has nuclear missiles and a reactor that can be overloaded. Captain Williams is making sure her ship's last act counts." The collision was visible even from Nexus Prime. The Resolute struck the Void Hunter flagship amidships, her reactor detonating in a miniature sun that consumed both vessels. The shockwave sent nearby ships tumbling through space. "Enemy flagship destroyed," Morrison reported. "The rest of their fleet is breaking formation. They're trying to retreat." But the humans weren't finished. Their surviving ships pursued the fleeing Void Hunters like wolves chasing wounded prey. The enemy vessels designed for surgical strikes against stationary targets couldn't outrun the human ships in open space. "This is impossible," Admiral Kesara whispered. "The Void Hunters don't retreat. They've never retreated. They've never fought humans before, Ambassador Chen replied. The battle lasted 2 more hours. When it was over, 47 Void Hunter ships had been destroyed or disabled. The remaining 13 had jumped out of the system in complete disarray. The human fleet had lost 18 ships, with another 30 damaged but still operational. Fleet Admiral Morrison to Nexus Prime, came the voice over the communication system. System is secure. Enemy forces have withdrawn. We're beginning search and rescue operations for survivors. The command center fell silent except for the soft hum of electronics. The alien delegates stared at the tactical display showing debris fields where the Void Hunter fleet had been. What they had just witnessed defied everything they knew about modern warfare. How? Admiral Kessera asked finally. How did you defeat a superior force so decisively? Ambassador Chen looked around at the assembled aliens, seeing the shock and confusion in their faces. Because we've been fighting wars for 200 years and they've been fighting extermination campaigns. There's a difference. Commander Zixtel studied the battle recordings. Your people fought like they expected to die. Some of them did die, Chen replied quietly. Captain Williams and her crew on the Resolute. The pilots who made attack runs against impossible odds. The engineers who stayed at their posts when their ships were falling apart around them. They died so that others could live. But why? Asked the Veltar representative. Why would they sacrifice themselves for strangers? Chen smiled sadly. Because that's what humans do.